Let's start to keep to the timeline. I'm Axel. I'm working for a law firm that is advising blockchain companies on ICOs and other tokens. We had that ICO issue, basically covered by Oliver, and he had some interesting figures. Sorry, I need to get this one. I'm a lawyer. I can elaborate on some legal questions that came up in the discussions, perhaps a bit more. Regulation is a scary issue for most of the blockchain companies, but the purpose of my presentation today is to show that it should perhaps not be that scary, and what the best strategy is to cope with regulation. ICOs have developed into a major seed and early stage finance instrument recently. The figures you see here are pretty old, but still they show how very fast blockchain investments have developed recently, and these are 2017 figures. The actual figures are much higher, but what is interesting to see is how an industry that considered itself to be very, very strong and mighty had been disrupted within a couple of months, basically. So the venture capitalists, the ordinary venture capitalists, kicked in a bit late and have been, outplaced in terms of money that has been placed into blockchain very, very fast. So I have never seen any industry being disrupted so quickly, at least on blockchain funding. Of course, venture capital funding on other companies is still much higher. But I think the first use case, token as ICO, as venture capital tool, will remain to grow and become more and more important. Why is that? I mean, the advantages of ICOs and cryptocurrency compared to traditional ways of financing are obvious. Very convenient for blockchain companies is that already white papers are financed. This is something that ordinary venture capitalists would not do. Without prototypes, without MVPs, put tons of money in it. Maybe good, maybe bad, but definitely helpful for a young industry to get going. The costs are definitely lower if the ICO is managed professionally. The speed is higher, so you can set up an ICO within a few weeks, perhaps months, whereas ordinary venture capital finance with the usual rounds of shows and whatever you have to do usually takes 6 to 12 months minimum. And I think most important that the target group is much broader, so the token can address not only the professional institutional venture capitalists, but anyone. But because anyone can be addressed, including retail investors, regulators are interested, or have become interested, and of course because lots of money is involved in it. There are some limitations on ICOs. You need a blockchain business model. A number of the business, so-called blockchain business models have not been business models that essentially needed blockchain technology, but have been disguised as blockchain business models. But that's fine for the moment. Everyone has to sort out what use case there really is for blockchain. The crypto community is still small, but growing. We've learned that there's a lot of various media and other statements campaigning basically against ICOs, and a few countries were tempted or put heavy restrictions on ICOs. But I say, these are a few countries only, although some jurisdictions are important, of course, like China and the States. In almost any state or any country that we consider relevant, regulations are underway or have been put in place already, and this is what has become more and more important and has driven costs for ICOs up. What do I mean if I talk about regulation? There are several layers of regulations. We have financial regulations that is almost always touched because an ICO wants to collect money for new business models. So they have a financing function, and they are mostly directed to the general public, including consumers. And finance regulation, most of it is consumer protection, so it's quite natural that regulators take a stronger look at it now where rather billions than millions of euros and dollars flow into blockchain business models. A little less, another aspect, but less focus on it is the e-commerce regulation. So if you don't issue a finance token or a security token, there's still other regulation. It's all done electronically, so the general e-commerce regulation kicks in. That applies to all contracts about delivery of goods and services, and a token is either a good or represents a good or a service. It's concluded by electronic means, and it's no financial product, but it still is a product, a regulated product. And of course, there are numerous other general consumer protection laws, including data protection. GDPR has been mentioned already. All these laws apply when no special regulations apply. And one of the basic instruments of consumer protection is always to request a written form requirement. And this is basically the death of many ideas to collect money from investors abroad or overseas. Because the sex appeal of ICOs, of course, is, well, you get cryptocurrency, you send out a token, and it's done. But if you have to send and write down paper, it's basically a killer. In any case, regulations are stress for everybody. And how do humans react when they have to cope with stress? There are 3 ways to do that. The early stages, I try to ignore that there's stress. We have still a number of statements in white papers which basically say we are not regulated. That's always funny to see, because there's almost no unregulated area anymore in this space, in this blockchain space. The next pattern, the next way of coping with stress is, well, it's not nice, I try to avoid it, or I try to find a work around it. That has a price. And yeah, perhaps the cleverest way to deal with it is to embrace it and look what's in it for me. You can do everything. You can ignore it, you can avoid it, you can embrace it. Everything has a price, in price of money, but also in freedom. If you go to jail, if you travel to the United States, that's another big issue. And of course, in having good nights or bad nights, if you consider your the legality or the illegality of your ICO. Ignorance may result in a criminal or civil liability. Avoidance costs money, because in a legal arena where basically everything is more or less regulated, you have to find specialist advisors who can help you work around, but these are at least as expensive as those who help you to cope with positively with ICOs and regulation. And yeah, to embrace it can be expensive, as love often is, but it's the result is that you can have good nights and save a lot of money, and you don't end up in jail. And of course, regulators are pushing the price even higher to make you comply. Make your choice. As I said, not only because I'm a lawyer, but I think the embracing idea is the most constructive way to deal with regulations. Is I want to confer the idea that regulation is many things. There are bad things in it, there are good things in it, but there are a lot of nuances in it, and perhaps this presentation helps you to understand that some of the things considered to be true are not that much true. So the bad thing is that regulations is indeed very complicated. It's multi-layered. There are different levels of regulation. A product, meaning the token, can be regulated, or the entity issuing a token can be regulated as well if they are doing a financial business or banking business. There are numerous laws that have to be taken into account, not only in one country like Germany, but on many jurisdictions. Still, I mean, we are living in a world that is dominated by national jurisdictions. National regulation is dominating on the global level, but there are some areas, big areas of course, like the United States or Europe, where they have a general framework or even a common framework that helps dealing with the many states in it. The good thing about regulation is that they can make things easier. This is something Britain has not understood when it was planning its Brexit. That the whole British finance industry benefits very, very, very much from financial regulation in the EU. The EU passport on financial products is something that is a huge competitive advantage for the British finance industry, and next year at this time it will be gone, and no one knows if there's anything that can replace it. And the British banks are basically cut off from the European market. They have to set up branches in Europe, so basically they're still in Europe with an important part of the business, and they need to be in Europe. In Europe we have a common framework for financial regulation and consumer protection that is very, very useful. The common internal market is based on the idea that we either accept what another country decides, or that we set up a framework that is mandatory for all jurisdictions, and this is basically what is happening in the financial sector. So the scope of freedom a national jurisdiction has in creating own regulation is very, very small, because it's so closely defined by European legislation. The good thing is, once you get approval for a product like a token in one European country, you can passport it, that's a technical term, you can passport it to any other European country within 24 hours for, I don't know how much money. I think it's maybe even costs nothing. It takes 24 hours and you can sell your product, you can sell your token on a safe basis in 27 or 28 still, but soon 27 countries of the EU. That means you have at least one big economic area where you are safe on regulatory risks. And still, even if the blockchain community believes that the blockchain itself inspires trust, a regulated product does inspire trust to the general public. I've been working a number of years with the, if you call it, so-called, again we have it here with the microphone. I've been working with the with part of the real estate sector that was called grey, because it worked on an unsafe regulatory basis, and people came to me and say, well, we need to be regulated. Now it's working again. We need to be regulated. Please try to get under a regulatory framework, then our products enjoy more trust and we can sell it easier. And when they finally were regulated, they were basically all happy. A number of them died because they couldn't comply, but all the rest survived and are still in business. So, one of the truths is that regulators have frequently published warnings about ICO, and here you can see why. This is something I took yesterday only from a Satish group. That's a source. You can see that it looks as if 81% of all ICOs are actually scams. We asked back, and well, they said no. Please read it differently. The figures are to some extent a problem because you can't collect much information about ICOs, but of the big number of ICOs they examined, the A1% you can see over there did not collect any money, or only very little money. Meaning, put differently, that 4 out of 5 ICOs that raised no or little money were actually scammed. So investors are not that stupid. But still, the number of ICOs that are still alive and successful is very, very small. It's just 3.8% out of, I think, 8 that are really going well. This is compared to, for example, IPOs, initial public offerings, a pretty low figure. I hope this will improve soon. So the warnings of the regulators are justified, but still, you cannot take from it that regulators hate blockchain business ideas. Completely prohibitive action is rare. Most regulators tend to take a very differentiated view, and some of them, even like the Swiss one, FINMA, acknowledge the innovative character of blockchain and its potential for their own country, so they try to support it. And when we speak to regulators, this is what we feel. So now let's dive a little bit deeper into what regulations actually have, what the impact of regulations is. The key question for any regulator is, what is that token? There are different models for ICO tokens. There's some sort of characterization. There's a currency, the utility, or security, or investment token. That's very rough and basic. In practice, tokens are often hybrids. They contain several features, and it's sometimes not that easy to make out what the basic idea is. And this is because many of the ICO companies wanted to disguise the real character. I mean, they want to collect money, and they try to do it by way of creating utility tokens. But of course, actually, it's meant to collect money, and quite often there is a security behind it. Regulators have been approaching this issue in different ways. The SEC has developed the Howey test. As a result, basically every token is a security. That does not mean it's prohibited, but it just has to comply with security regulations. It's a pretty strict security regulations in the United States. And when you don't comply, you are immediately put into jail when you set your feet on American soil. So this is something we have to tell our clients more often than we should. We can do that, but beware of going to the United States. And this is where the big investors are. In Europe, as usual, there is no unified opinion on what a token is. I mean, utility token is fine. The big questions amongst European regulators is, what is a security token? I mean, a currency token like Ether, Bitcoin, that's pretty clear. Utility token is pretty clear as well. But what is a security token? We have a common security regulation framework in the European Union, but still, what the term security actually means is often disputed. We have the material test, the duck test, so a token that looks like a duck, that behaves like a duck, makes noises like a duck, is a duck, even if it says I'm a utility token. Or we have some formal qualifications, so is it transferable? Does the right out of the token follow the token, or does the token follow the right? These are the legal questions behind it. As it looks, the big regulators like the German BaFin apply the duck test, so everything every token that represents a right to take part in the increase of a value, or even to dividends or voting rights, will be qualified as a a security token, and then they have to comply with all the regulations that there are. The best thing I've read about tokens, qualifications, is a paper published by the Swiss Finmark recently. Pretty simple currency token, as I said. Need to have a payment function, need to be transferable. Of course, they only have to apply not of course, but they have to comply with anti-money laundering laws, but no prospectus or any other paper needs to be published. Utilities token are pretty simple as well. You need to provide access to digital services or goods. But, and this is where it becomes a bit more difficult, if it contains an investment feature, it's immediately qualified as security token again. So, what is an investment feature? If you promise the investors they take part in the development of the value of the company to some extent, in some way or the other, you cannot anymore qualify it as a simple utility token. This is just the utility token from the Swiss perspective is only this what we call access token. You send it, you get access to a platform or whatever, and then it will be burned, and that's it. That's all you get. And security token, this is the most exciting issue, is any token that contains a promise of the issuer. You will be part of the development of the company in one way or the other. Either you get dividends, or you can sell it at a higher value, or we even take it back, and so on. Security tokens have to comply with the securities laws, and most important for ICO issuers, they have to provide a prospectus. Right. Question.
Yeah, one question. I know DWF also advises BrickBlock, because I
Right.
saw the live stream yesterday, and so I suppose the tokens would qualify as security tokens because they entitle you to the interest, to the rent of the property.
That's what is to be achieved, right?
And so does that mean BrickBlock has to issue a prospectus
Right.
per
Yeah.
entity?
Yeah. BrickBlock is I'm not allowed to talk about clients, but BrickBlock is a good example of a company that embraces regulation, because we said you have to give investors information anyway. So the prospectus information is just a structured way of providing necessary information. So if you do it anyway, do it in a prospectus way, and then you benefit from the advantages of passporting and European regulation. Regulation is not about prohibiting or allowing something in most cases. It's about transparency and supervision. So the regulators, we live in a free world, they don't judge about the reasonableness of an ICO offer. They just tell you need to inform your investors. If you collect other people's money and the investors have a right to be fully informed about the investment. I think that's fair. So you have to provide a minimum set of information in the prospectus. Actually, it's a big set, but this is what they want. And we want to see the prospectus and you need to have it approved before you can do a public offering. But if we approve it, you can passport it to any other country in the United States. Besides these public rules, we have a civil liability that also applies. But this is very important. The civil liability exists for all other information an ICO issuer gives. So if you publish information on your website, in your white paper, wherever, and it's not true, or it's even fraud, you could be held liable before civil courts. Perhaps not by a regulator, but before civil courts. So I'm finished already. What I want to say is, if you collect money, give information to the investors, that builds trust more than every blockchain solution and technical solution will do. It's an effort. but it's a lot less effort than the trouble you can get if you don't comply with regulations you can have. So my strong advice is embrace regulation in any way. You will always find advisors who can help you and solve the complex issue, but you are fine and can sleep well. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much. We have time for some questions also.
Yes. About gambling, like if I put any game into the blockchain, I'm not the provider of the game.
Sorry,
About gambling.
Yes, gambling, right?
If I write some code, I basically just kind of put an infrastructure together, but I put it in the blockchain where it is publicly available to everyone, and I'm not the provider. I'm not providing the website or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody can play it. It's gambling, definitely.
Yeah.
So who's responsible for it?
The token, I mean, the token is no gambling.
The
token, you don't
need any token. You just put a piece of code together which runs with the video.
Yeah. I mean, if there is no value, transfer it. It's not even a currency. It's just a game. It's not regulated.
It's not regulated. So I can put any gambling, whatever game on the Ethereum blockchain that's not regulated. I'm fine.
Yeah, I mean, if you want a little opinion, come back and I have to see the business model. But as I said, it's about transferring value or inviting people to participate in creating value. But if you invite people to play a game, it's not regulated.
But it can basically maybe be millions in winning.
If you earn money, yeah. But do you earn money from what? From other people, third parties?
It could be that I charge a fee, but it could also be that someone wins a million.
I'm not aware. In Germany, there is no gambling regulation, as far as I know. I know that's a big thing in Gibraltar. Yes, that might be.
But only if I'm a provider of the gambling platform. But in this case, I'm not a provider of the platform. No, basically, if I put it into the blockchain, I'm not even saying someone should play it, and it's running in the virtual machine of everyone. So, who is responsible?
Okay,
I don't need a license.
I would say that if you live in Germany and you earn some money, you have to pay taxes in any way. I don't know.
That's
whatever.
tax is fine.
Yeah.
Let's put the discussion offline at this point. Getting very specific.
But this Glücksspiel issue is, of course, I mean, you need license under the ordinary commercial law. Any commercial activity it needs a very basic license. And Glücksspiel does as well.
Commercially, I'm providing it.
Yeah.
But this is not the case.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know your business in detail. We have to review every business model in detail and look what the token is doing before we can give you a reliable answer of what is regulated or not. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks again. And